and welcome back to Suits and Laterals, the show where we talk about the NFL both on and off the field. You're listening to the voice of Jeff Rich, formerly of morethanafan.net, and I'm joined by Chris Green, my longtime partner on this podcast and many others. Chris, it's been a while. We've gone without football for a couple weeks, but pitchers and catchers report soon. Not our line of topic, but the sports landscape, it's always shifting, right?
Absolutely. It just goes from one to the next. I mean, you have the NFL season finishing, then now you're in the heart of the NBA season and trade deadlines. And then, like you said, pitchers and catchers are reporting today, actually. So it just goes from one thing to the next. And, of course, you got the NFL Combine next week, too.
12-month news cycle. Almost every
Absolutely.
Sport's like that. The NBA kind of has its lulls. I mean, baseball's lulls almost exist in season sometimes if you're really watching every day from April to August. Around the end of August, beginning of September, unless you got a dog in the fight, baseball kind of loses its draw with me. We were talking a little bit before the show how, not everybody has to be specific to one sport. I tend to be more of a football guy, but I don't think about the football. I don't think football after the draft. I'm all about baseball. We are going to talk about the offseason today, but we do have a Super Bowl to talk about, and we've got a long NFL offseason that's going to fill up that 12-month news cycle.
Absolutely. I mean, we had the Super Bowl. Like I said, it's been a couple weeks since that, and the NFL has worked their craft so much to make it that it doesn't matter what day it is during the calendar year. There's something to talk about with that, whether it's the combine, the draft, free agency, training camp, season, playoffs. They've got it all covered now. A lot of these other sports could really take a cue from them, and I think they have, actually.
Yeah, and we talked about the season. That's kind of what we focused on this show, considering that we started right as the preseason was beginning in August. We took you through the regular season. We had some bye weeks of our own, including last week, but, Super Bowl, maybe not the freshest thing on everybody else's mind, but I think it's kind of funny when you think about it, and I might have said this last week, I might not have, but there was a certain point in the season, I think about 4 or 5 games in, when you looked at the 4-0 Broncos and the 4-0, 5-0 Carolina Panthers, and you thought that they were both kind of fraudulent. They earned their spot in the postseason, they hosted all the playoff games, they go to the Super Bowl, and the guy that's been there 4 times comes away with his second Super Bowl ring. One Peyton Manning. What's his legacy, minus all the off-field stuff that we're about to get into? But just from a football perspective alone, how do you rank him among people that have played the game the last 25 or 30 years?
Well, I mean, depending on who you ask, I think it's going to be a little bit of a difference. I think he's definitely in the top 10 quarterbacks of all time. You could argue maybe even the top 5. I mean, in all honesty, if you look at his numbers during the regular season versus the playoffs, I would say it's a completely different thing. I mean, if the regular season, you could say he's probably a top 3 quarterback. Playoffs drops him down a little bit, but he does have 2 Super Bowl rings now, so you really can't take that away from him saying he never won the big game. He did, even though, let's be honest, in this one, he really wasn't the reason that they won this game.
He really wasn't the reason in Super Bowl 41 either. I mean, if you really look back, you think, first of all, they're playing the Bears, who had an anemic offense led by Rex Grossman. But Joseph Adai, moved the ball, kept the thing going. Manning wasn't bad in that game, but he's a Hall of Famer. There's no question about that.
Absolutely.
He's a unique player. He's a guy like that reminds me. If you watch any basketball, he's like a Reggie Miller. You're just never gonna duplicate. You're never gonna duplicate a guy like him. You could try to emulate him, and you could try to take aspects of his game, but there's never gonna be another Peyton Manning.
I gotta ask though, real quick though. Reggie Miller's your comparison to Peyton Manning? Is that because of the Indianapolis thing?
Just a unique player. When Reggie retired the last game that he played against Richard Hamilton or Rip Hamilton, he told him, he's like, there's nobody like us. We're the 2. So I always think of him, not because I don't want to just take a guy that's above and beyond, because I think that when you look at overall success, you got to put Montana and Brady, and not to mention a slew of others from before our time. There are quite a few players you have to put above Peyton Manning. Just because you look at the Super Bowl record, he's 2-2. He only got there 4 times, despite the fact that his team made the playoffs almost every year of his 18 or 19-year career. So, the big moments count. He's a great player. You never wanted to face him as a defensive coordinator, but everyone found a way to knock him out. Almost all but 2 years, somebody found a way to beat him in January or February.
Yeah, that's true. I was just curious of what the comparison based on, because Reggie Miller never won a title either.
That's true. But he didn't have a Joseph Adai. He didn't have a better defense that Tony Dungy orchestrated. Reggie Miller. I can't really remember anybody that any coach that he even played for, unless Larry Bird was coaching when he was still around.
Yeah, I could name a few of them, but it's not. It's fine. I was just curious. Like I said, I didn't know if it was an Indianapolis thing or what exactly the comparison was, because I just see them as two completely different players. But like you said, they're both unique in their own ways. They both made their impacts on their respective games.
Yeah, right. But Manning's made an impact in some of the tabloid pages. We talked about the Al Jazeera accusations. Well, not to mention the injuries. The stuff on the field, really too. It's been a rough year overall for Manning, but kudos to him. Because him going to Denver is all in vain if they don't get at least one title while he's there, right?
Absolutely. It's it makes the whole thing. I can't think of the word I'm trying to come up with, but worthwhile, I guess. Because you think about it, Peyton Manning was released from the Colts a couple of years ago. He was cut, and he goes to Denver. Nobody ever knows how he's going to play again after having all the neck issues and everything. And they invest all this money to him. He has these couple of amazing seasons. They don't do anything. They got trounced in the Super Bowl by the Seahawks a couple of years ago, but he made it back this year. And like I said, despite the fact that he really didn't do anything that entire game other than the first drive, he got his second title.
That first drive was beautiful, though. It was just fighting Owen Daniels over the middle, the unsung hero on the offensive side of the ball. I absolutely thought Von Miller deserved to be the MVP in that game. So rarely does it go to a defensive player, especially when you don't have a situation like was it Dexter Jackson with Tampa Bay where he gets the key interceptions. Miller was just a force. He gave Cam Newton a hard time, and Von Miller wasn't shy about doing the talk show circuit after the fact too. I had a few weeks there where I was off during the day, so I actually watched him on Ellen, and he was quite the entertaining character. He's a free agent, so the last game he played in a Broncos uniform could have been in Super Bowl 50. What I take away from the Ellen show is he says he would love to return to the Broncos, but he knows that he's worth a lot of money. So the open market might be a better option. It might not be.
Yeah, that's what they all say. They really want to go back to the teams, and obviously they're a Super Bowl winning team now, and that defense, assuming he re-signs and they keep Malik Jackson as well, they will have another amazing defense next year. So, but they are older, and they have to figure out what they're going to do with the quarterback position, whether it's Brock Osweiler or what have you, and go from there. But do you franchise him if you're the Broncos?
That's tough because these players take offense to that franchise tag. It's almost like the loophole that the owners created that the players reluctantly accepted. Franchising could work if you're going to work out a deal. If you're just going to keep him there for another year with Brock Osweiler at quarterback, I don't know. I don't know if there's other pieces you want to put together on that defense. They all would start playing Moneyball there in Denver. It doesn't seem like their MO, but I think in the NFL, it's just so healthy for the players to return to their teams. Other than Reggie White, there hasn't been a huge, big impact free agent player. Other than maybe I think you can add Manning to that class, even though he didn't win as quickly as Reggie won in Green Bay after leaving the Philadelphia Eagles.
Yeah, here's the other thing I was kind of thinking about is Von Miller does have a little bit of a negative past to him, too. He was suspended, was it 2 years ago? I believe he missed at least the first 6 or 8 games of the season for some issues. So I just wonder, is there going to be teams out there that are going to willing to commit $100 million or whatever it'll take to sign him?
Well, he's got to go somewhere with a good secondary because Denver gets to the quarterback quick, but if you don't have that secondary, you saw what Cam Newton was able to do to the Arizona Cardinals, that he couldn't do against the Denver Broncos. One, because he had the defense coming right at him. Two, because he had no one to dump it off to. They're just the Broncos are so good on the coverage side of the ball, and big golf clap goes out to Mr. Wade Davis. Just poop for brains as a head coach, but he's just a heck of a defensive coordinator. There's a lot of guys like that.
Yeah, absolutely, and he's definitely proven that over the years. So, I mean, he's had his opportunities as a head coach. And, I mean, Wade Phillips, too, just to go. You think of baseball already. But, yeah, he's definitely shown his stripes as a coordinator. He's had a questionable record as a head coach, but you know what? His defenses have always been tremendous.
That's a good thing. They loved him in Houston. They love him everywhere where he wasn't a head coach. Is basically what it comes down to. So some of these coordinators, do get paid almost as much as head coaches, and deservedly so, because you want to give them the money, you want to keep them around, but you just can't let them be the CEO. They just don't have that gene in them. And the players, of course, help too. So Von Miller, the top free agent in this class, according to Greg Rosenthal at NFL.com. On the other side of the ball in the Super Bowl, you had Josh Norman, probably one of the big three on the defensive side of the ball, along with Luke Kuechly and Thomas Davis Jr., or this is Thomas Davis Sr., I think. But, that's a good secondary. It's better for having Josh Norman in it, but the money that he's gonna demand, is it worth putting all your eggs in one basket? If you're the front office in Carolina, is Josh Norman that good of a football player, or do you let him test the free agent waters?
I don't know what their current cap situation is, but I mean, if they have the cap room, I think you got to keep him. I mean, that defense has been terrific all year, so I wouldn't be breaking up that team if I don't have to.
Is there a team that you see being a cover corner away from being a great defense, if not a great overall football team?
I
didn't prepare you. Yeah, I didn't prepare you for that question. That's fair enough, and it's tough to say because, like you said, I mean, there's so many stipulations. In baseball, you could just say, "Oh, that's a great shortstop. This team X needs a great shortstop. You should sign there." And then it's just a matter of...
you look at the Jets. They brought in 3 cornerbacks this year, and I mean, they went from a not lottery pick team, but a top 10 draft pick team to a playoff team. So, I mean, the defensive backs can definitely make an impression, but I don't know if one's gonna. I mean, unless you already have a stud one out there, maybe you like the Raiders or somebody like that. He'd make an impact with.
Yeah, Woodson retiring from the game. I mean, I think that's a big deal. I think that's right up there with Peyton Manning. They were 1-2 in the '98 draft, if I recall correctly, and they were great football players for 18 years. So I just see a lot of I see a lot of great there, and who knows if what the Raiders are going to add. They seem like they have their head on straight for a change.
Yeah, isn't that scary to say about the Raiders?
Well, you know what? Everybody's due. I mean, even, we keep talking about baseball because pitchers and catchers report it. But, we're finally talking about the real reality of the Chicago Cubs being world champions. You never want to see that team all down in the dumps. I think for years we saw the Tampa Bay Buccaneers that way, the Cincinnati Bengals, the Arizona Cardinals. The only team that seemingly can't escape it is the Cleveland Browns.
Yeah, lucky us.
So, hey, just scanning through the list of free agents, Rosenthal's top free agents. Let me ask you. I'm just gonna say the name. We were talking about the Jets. Muhammad Wilkerson, a couple years ago, top pick out of Temple. Really an anchor on a great defensive line for Todd Bowles. We talked about how the Jets added 3 players in their secondary, and they went from being a laughingstock to very nearly being a playoff team. Muhammad Wilkerson got to stay with the Jets, right?
You would think. I mean, they do definitely have some other impact players in their defensive line, whether it's Sheldon Richardson or Leonard Williams. I mean, but he is the best of the 3. I think it just depends. I think I think it's likely they try to franchise him. I don't know that they're going to keep him anything beyond that, though.
All right, Alshon Jeffrey. I think he's a player that's most likely to be on the go. I guess there's players that might like receiving balls thrown by Jay Cutler, but that Chicago Bears locker room, just their offensive reputation over the last forever, it just doesn't seem like the place to play. It was a nice situation for him when he got to be the number 2 behind Brandon Marshall, but that situation in Chicago just doesn't seem sustainable enough. That you're going to bank your future on it unless they cut the big check. I mean, him going to the Browns or another team.
I'm thinking the Panthers. Actually, I think he'd be a great fit on the Panthers.
Him and Travis Benjamin. That'd be an interesting combo, and they have the great tight end there with they got a lot out of their little track stars too in Philly Brown and Ted Ginn Jr. So that's an interesting situation. That's a winning team, but let's see if Jerry Richardson wants to spend that kind of money in free agency. Cordy Glenn of the Buffalo Bills, likely to be franchised. Jason Pierre-Paul, we don't know if he really recovered from the 4th of July fireworks incident last year. So I would say his days with the Giants are limited, especially with Coughlin out. Eric Berry, that's a guy that's got to go back to Kansas City. Malik Jackson, another player on that Broncos defense. It might be an either-or situation between Von Miller and Malik Jackson there.
I would agree with that. I mean, you only have so much money to go around. They've already invested so much money in that defense, so I don't know that they can afford to spend it on both of them, especially when they do have some holes on the offensive side of the ball. But then, I will say, though, they are going to be losing the money that they owe Peyton Manning, so that could make a difference there as well.
Money coming off the books is always a good thing, especially when you got somebody with diminishing skills returns like Manning. Oliver Vernon, the defensive end that plays opposite Cameron Wake in Miami. Doug Martin, the running back for the Buccaneers. He's gone through a couple coaching changes. And then Bruce Irvin, I think he's one of the more interesting players on this list because Seattle shelled out so much money to bring to bring some of their guys back, like Bobby Wagner and Cam Chancellor. Bruce Irvin, a guy that was really questioned as a first-round pick out of West Virginia. Pete Carroll made him into a football player.
Yeah, he's definitely makes an impact as a pass rusher. I mean, some will say he's not much more than that, but I don't know. I could see that one going either way, to be honest.
All right, let's see. Russell Okung, a great player on a Seattle offensive line that's shoddy at best. I think that he goes back. Eric Weddle's days in San Diego are quite obviously over. He's 30 years old, but he's a heck of a football player. Out of the University of Utah, he's played for San Diego. It looked like he was ready to retire there, and then they just kind of raked him over the coals over the last couple months here.
Yeah, I'm sure he's gone from San Diego for sure. So, but I think he'll find his way somewhere, and he'll make an impact for that team.
All right, a little run on quarterbacks around the teens here as we rank our 2016 free agents. Sam Bradford from the Eagles, Kirk Cousins from the Redskins. I imagine both of those guys return to their 2015 employers.
I don't know. I mean, I would assume you're probably right. Kirk Cousins, I'm still a little bit skeptical on. I mean, he's been very up and down. He had a good year this year. I mean, they made the playoffs, obviously, but he's also been very pedestrian at times throughout his career. So it's just going to depend on how much money they want to invest in it. I mean, don't get me wrong. I don't expect them to turn back to Robert Griffin, but I'm not sure about that one. Sam Bradford, I definitely think has a much better chance of sticking with Philadelphia.
Okay, Matt Forte, I've been seeing rumors that he's going to be the next guy in Seattle to kind of replace not replace Marshawn Lynch, but play a role in the backfield that has been ceded to Lynch over the years. I think that he's going to have a tough time competing if he does indeed go to Seattle. I think Thomas Rawls is the man there.
Well, that's what I was thinking. Is I don't even know why they would need to bring him in all honesty. I mean, look, they brought in Fred Jackson last year, and he didn't do anything for him. I mean, Rawls had an amazing run there while he was healthy. So I would be surprised if they do that. I think they're more likely to draft somebody.
All right, let's keep going down the list. Andre Smith, the right tackle from the Bengals. I imagine that he goes back to Cincinnati. Denver defensive players back on the list. Danny Trevathan. This is a guy that would have given you the old Homer Simpson who a couple years ago, but alongside Brandon Marshall and the Shaq Barrett. I mean, Denver's so deep. I think that they could let Trevathan walk. I think that he's going to the highest bidder, and not that Denver doesn't want him, but Denver doesn't need him as much as they need to save some of their scratch.
Absolutely. I mean, they're going to have to prioritize who they want to bring back. So I definitely think he could be on the outside looking in.
All right, Janoris Jenkins, cornerback for the Los Angeles Rams. I don't think there's any way that Jeff Fisher lets him leave. So we'll move to another player that's probably going to return to his organization, and that would be Brock Osweiler, the future of the Denver Broncos, obviously.
Yeah, I would be pretty surprised if they let him go. I just don't know that there's anybody out there right now that's a big upgrade over him. I mean, obviously he's been there for several years. He knows the offense, and he did have some success while he was out there this year.
Yeah. Well, we figure Manning's riding off into the sunset. I haven't seen anything official on it yet, but I don't have my ear to the ground nearly as much as I used to. I imagine Manning's gone, but do you think that Manning was a slam dunk decision after he won his Super Bowl to leave, or do you think that some of this off-field stuff, particularly this? Now we discredit not we as in you and I, but we as the collective media, somewhat dismiss the Al Jazeera accusations just because of the non-Anglo, maybe because of the non-Anglo name on the Middle East news, the CNN of the Middle East, I guess is what it's referred to. Then we have this story, about a 20-year-old story from the University of Tennessee about sexual assault allegations against one Peyton Manning. And I look at the source, and I look at this, this particular writer. His name is Sean King for, I don't know who he's writing for. He used to write for the Daily Cause. I think
it's USA Today now.
Yeah, he wrote a lot of mistruths about police brutality and street justice, at least from where I sit anyway. He's lied about his past. Like Brian Williams, no matter how credible he was before you found out he was a big fat liar, after the fact, nothing can be taken with anything more than a grain of salt. So, I just don't want to weigh this story. I've heard that this story broke 20 years ago when the stuff first happened, and there was just no substance to it. So I think that we're just trying to pick on a legend on his way out, is what I think.
Yeah, I think he has his reasons for going after Manning. I mean, there's been a lot of speculation. It's because of the after effects of the Super Bowl, where Cam Newton kind of walked out of his press conference at the end after being overly frustrated from the game and all that. I mean, and Chris, really, can you blame somebody for that?
And that's worth talking about too. How Cam Newton behaved. I think that's probably a bigger story. It's just every time you criticize Cam Newton, there's one card that everybody wants to play if they want to defend him. And I'm not going to play that card. I'm just going to defend him because he's young. He was frustrated. I know what it's like to lose. I know what it's like to lose a big game personally. So I look at that, and I kind of Newton's got to be a professional. He owes it to, protect the shield. Even though he hasn't been a problem off the field, he's got to protect the shield. I don't think that Roger Goodell much cares for the attitudes of Cam Newton walking on a press conference, or even going back to last year where Marshawn Lynch was just, for lack of a better term, or more of a less family-friendly term, he was just a big jerk about it. So,
well, I mean, I guess that's what I would say too. I mean, in all honesty, getting into this real quick is that look at what Lynch did last year. Was what Newton did any worse than what Lynch did? I mean, I would say yes, it's the lack of maturity, but I mean, like I said, it's at the end of the season. You just lost the Super Bowl, and I mean, really, you played your worst game of the season during it. And I mean, there's been things out there before. He's not exactly the best loser, but you know what? I don't think it's any worse. I almost think the Lynch stuff is worse than what Newton did. Yeah.
So much worse. Lynch's stuff wasn't emotionally driven. Lynch just didn't want to be part of the show. Newton just didn't want to be that person. The person that he was on the inside. He didn't want to be that person on the outside. At least from where I sit. You play in the biggest game of your life. And he's played in a junior college championship. He's played in a a BCS national championship, so he knows what the big stage is like, and he's never lost those games. So this is just a new feeling that he didn't want to, because after the game, probably 24, 48 hours and possibly even 6 months, that stays with you, and you really wear it. It was just so fresh on him that I don't think that he could be an outwardly person while inwardly he was dying and suffering on the inside. He's not the first person to lose a Super Bowl. We've had 50 losers of that game, but it's tough to handle. It's and you and I can't even fathom how that feels.
Yeah, no, like I said, yes, he could have handled it better, but I get it. I think anybody who really looks at it gets it. Like I said, whether he could have handled it better, yes, absolutely he could have. But, I mean, you can't just kill the guy because of it. You can have your opinion and say, I think he should have done this, I think he should have done that, and that's fine. Everybody's entitled to their opinion on it, but it's not life or death.
Right. So, that's pretty much the Super Bowl. We're about out of time here, but I did want to touch on the NFL draft. Looking at the top 10, Titans at 1, Browns at 2, Chargers at 3, Cowboys at 4, Jags at 5, Ravens at 6, Niners at 7, Dolphins at 8, Tampa Bay at 9, and the Giants at 10. Now I'm going to look at two of those teams from the top 10, the Ravens and the Giants. They're probably not bottom 10 teams in the NFL, especially the Ravens. They're not a bottom 6 team in the NFL. It was just a lost season. And, we see the San Francisco Giants win the World Series every other year, and then they have the lost seasons in between. It's not quite like that. The Ravens are a few years removed from the Super Bowl. A lot of that cast is already gone. Ditto for the Giants. But I think those are teams that they're going to be really dangerous if they can add one of those top 10 weapons. As far as the rest of the group, I mean, the Cowboys at 4. I don't know what it is about the Cowboys, but they always seem like they're a better team than what their record is.
Yeah, I think the Cowboys definitely have some holes, and they need to figure out what they're going to do. But I agree with you 100% as far as the Giants and the Ravens. I think those two teams just had down years. I mean, obviously the Giants made a head coaching change at the end of the season, but sometimes you just need to freshen things up too. So I would definitely expect them to, if not be in the playoffs, I think they'll be contending to at least be a 500 team next year. I fully expect the Ravens to be back and competing for the playoffs again next season.
I'd like to see the Chargers put it together. I think that there's a little bit of a window there with, Denver's got to have salary cap issues, even with Manning leaving. But, you're going to have a first full-time starter in Brock Osweiler. So Denver's vulnerable. Kansas City looked really hot at the end of the year, even though they lost to New England. They got to be a team that's consideration for the West. But you got Rivers coming in. Once you have your quarterback, you can kind of fill in the rest of the pieces. And I think sooner or later it's going to happen for Phillip Rivers. And it might very well happen next year. And it might happen in San Diego. We didn't talk much about the Los Angeles Rams and the potential for the Los Angeles Raiders if the Chargers don't become the Los Angeles Chargers.
Yeah, it'll be interesting to see how that all plays out. I mean, as of right now, the Raiders are back in Oakland for at least this season, though they're still continuing to play around with places like Las Vegas and Oklahoma City. So that'll be interesting to see what happens with them. And, Dean Spanos keeps saying that he's fully committed to trying to keep the Chargers in San Diego while simultaneously trying to move them to LA. So we'll see what happens with there. Right now, it's the Raiders or the Rams in LA, and who knows what else is going to go on.
Hey, well, do you know how you can tell when an NFL owner is not telling the truth?
When he's speaking?
Yeah, when he's moving, when his lips are moving. You you nailed that. Hey, this is our last show of the season, episode 25. You got any parting shots on the NFL, the 2015 season, or the upcoming 2016 season?
Well, it was a very interesting season. I spent most of the season saying I didn't believe the Carolina Panthers were as good as they were, and they went all the way to the Super Bowl and finished 17-2, I think was their final record by the time it was all said and done. So, they had a tremendous season, and it just it goes to show you that any team can come out of nowhere to go to the Super Bowl and possibly even win it. So I definitely think they will be a force to reckon with next year. And I'll be curious to see how some of these other AFC teams come back. I mean, the Patriots are there every year, but they are getting older every year. I mean, Tom Brady is pushing, I think he's 37-ish, somewhere in there now. And at some point, that whole Belichick Brady magic's going to go away, and I'm just curious if it comes with a thud or if it just they go off in the sunset. But time will tell on that. Obviously, we'll see what happens with Peyton Manning. Right now, it's looking like he's going to walk off into the sunset, which I think is the way to do it. Once you go out with a Super Bowl win, it's kind of hard to top that, even if you did have a down season. So I think those are my big things for 2015. As far as 2016 goes, I hope my Browns finally go up and stay there. They don't have to win the Super Bowl, but a 500 record would be nice, though I doubt it's coming.
All right. I'm going to tell you that I am selling low on the Buffalo Bills. I believed in Rex Ryan. I believe that they'd be able to get it done with Tyrod Taylor going over there and taking over as a starting quarterback. They've just got more questions than answers. And it's they've been a really disappointing football team, quite frankly. Ditto for the Houston Texans. Find a quarterback. Find a way to make Jadeveon Clowney work in that defense with J.J. Watt. And best of luck to Bill O'Brien going forward there. I think the AFC South is there for the taking.
They still need a quarterback.
And they definitely need a quarterback. And I am going to buy on the Green Bay Packers. I thought that they were one of the best teams in the NFL. I think that they quite obviously missed Jordy Nelson. They had all kinds of injuries on defense. I look for the Green Bay Packers, along with the Arizona Cardinals and obviously the Carolina Panthers, to make a lot of noise in the NFC in 2016.
Well, let me ask you real quick before we go with your Arizona Cardinals there. What is it going to take for them to get over the hump? I mean, they looked like one of the best teams in the NFL until they got to the playoffs, and they squeaked by in that first matchup, but they got thrashed by the Panthers.
The answer I have is the wrong answer, but I think they need to upgrade from Carson Palmer. But that wasn't their problem in the playoffs. The problem in the playoffs was a lot of Carson Palmer. A lot of Carson Palmer. It's fair to criticize him, but their defense just didn't show up against Carolina, and they just let Cam Newton eat them alive. James Betcher needs to do something with that defense. They've had to replace their defensive coordinator quite a bit over the last couple of years. They went from Ray Horton to Todd Bowles to Betcher here, and it's all guys from within the same system, but it's different voices. It's tough to listen to, and don't forget how good a player Darrell Washington was before he took off. And Kevin Minter, a serviceable player, is not a superstar. I think they need to add some superstar level talent to that linebacker position as well. So, all right, he's Chris Green. You can follow him on Twitter at CGRN731. As for Suits and Laterals, you can follow the show's Twitter handle at Suits Laterals. And that's going to do it for this week. This is going to be my last episode. I'm kind of retiring from the podcast game, so it's been a pleasure to broadcast to all of you. I'll be watching the NFL, and I hope all of you will too. Enjoy it. This has been Suits and Laterals.